So we are this class is being shared on our Facebook live feed, and also it's being recorded through our Zoom. And it's my great pleasure to introduce Lisa Armony, who is an Orange County resident but works right now for Hillel International. Before Prior to this, she was the Chief Impact Officer with our Jewish Federation in Orange County. And about a year ago, a little more, she started working for Hillel International. And she was, Lisa has taught me more about sort of the complicated questions about Israel that we've all been navigating for many years now, really before 2021 and before. I mean, this has sort of been the soup that she's been swimming in for so long, really understanding that there are so many nuances when it comes to Israel and anti-Semitism and Zionism and what's happening in, in sort of in world sentiment. And so she today is going to share a little bit about her work with Hillel, why she took the job, and then how that's evolved since October 7th. So Lisa, I turn it over to you, and thank you so much for being with us.
Great. Thank you, Marcia. It's always so great to work with you, and I'm such a fan of yours and the real deep education work that you do in the community. So it's great, and it's great to see so many familiar faces. It's, I left Federation after being there for 11 years and really feeling like I was working in the, in this great central meeting place of the Jewish community in Orange County, and running into people all the time, whether it was in the Federation space or just in the community. And for the last year, I've been working for Hillel International, which is based in Washington, D.C., but really doesn't have a central base anymore. We don't go into the office anymore, and I still live in Orange County, so spend a lot of my time in my office here at home. And so it's just any opportunity to reconnect with friends in the community and share what we're doing, and have these learning spaces is something I really appreciate. I guess what I'll do is start with a little bit of an overview of the Campus Climate Initiative, which is the department at Hillel International that I've been running for the last year. I want to tell you a little bit about what it is, what it does, why it was developed by Hillel International, and why we feel this is really the cutting edge of the work that needs to be done on college campuses. And then I'll talk a little bit about what we're calling the post October 7th period, the crisis that we're in this moment, which we're really treating not so much as a as a crisis in the moment, but sort of an ongoing change in the campus environment, because I'm not quite sure we're gonna go back to the way things were before October 7th, and we can talk a little bit about what that is. And I want to open this up very, very early on in the discussion to your questions, because I want to hear what's on your mind. What are you thinking about? What do you want to know? And then we can make this just an iterative conversation, because I know I don't need to tell this group about what anti-Semitism is, and I know it's a much more advanced conversation, and I want to meet you all where you are. So I'm gonna share my screen because I have a couple of slides I think it's just for those who do better visually. I think it's just easier to do this both by speaking to you and sharing some slides. So let me just go. Okay, so just to give you a little bit of a sense of what we're dealing with as a campus community in the aftermath of October 7th. Just in the last, about 7 weeks, 8 weeks since the massacre by Hamas in southern Israel, we have seen 663 anti-Semitic incidents on 131 unique campuses around the country. This is just the United States and Canada. To give you some sort of a reference point, that's last year, in the whole year, we saw about 300 incidents on college campuses. So in a 7-week period, we've seen, I think somebody said it was about a 700% increase in anti-Semitism year over year, which is pretty astounding. And I'm sure that you've heard about some of the incidents that have taken place on places on some of the campuses, some of them that have made the headlines. Of those 663 incidents, 39 of them have been incidents of physical harassment. Okay. That's an unprecedented number. We don't see a lot of incidents of physical harassment on college campuses. Unfortunately, we see them in the community. But this has been something that's really been startling for us. And when I say physical harassment, I mean things like Jewish students getting spit on, Jewish students getting pushed or knocked off bicycles, or hit, punched, those kinds of things. 8 of those cases have required Hillel International to provide legal support for students. And I'm gonna talk a little bit more about the kind of legal support Hillel's providing, because we're providing a variety of different kinds of things for students right now in this post-October 7th environment. But specifically, 8 of the incidents that we've seen have required us to provide legal action. 230 of those incidents have involved vandalism and graffiti, which means both vandalism of Jewish institutions like Hillel houses and Chabad houses and AEPI property, but also university facilities. We've seen graffiti and in classrooms, university classrooms, and things like that. So, just a really disturbing and significant increase across the board in incidents. This is a little bit of survey data that we've done. We've been doing these kinds of pulse surveys over the last two months or so of Jewish students, and this is something, some data that was released about 2 weeks ago. The survey was taken November 14th and 15th. So out of 300 students that were surveyed for this, 84% of them said that the situation in Israel and Gaza is affecting them in some way. Okay. 68% of these students have said that they are sad, and 54% of them have said they're scared. And that's a really important point that I want to unpack for you a little bit. It has to also do with the next data point, which is that 37%, or more than 1 in 3 students, say they have needed to hide their Jewish identity on campus. So this is not a phenomenon that has been, we were unaware of on college campuses over the last number of years. We hear incidents from our Hillel professionals and from students about this concern about showing up on campus as their whole selves, which means, in their Jewish identity. There's been some concerns over the year about what might be the implications of them outing themselves as Jews in certain spaces, and particularly in progressive spaces where, in some cases, Zionism has been used as a litmus test to determine whether Jews are or not welcome into those spaces. Sometimes students have shared with us that in the classrooms, they've been concerned about sharing that they have some kind of an identity connection with Israel because of concern about criticisms that they might face from their peers or from faculty, where the environment may not be as friendly towards Israel as we might hope, or at least as tolerant of Israel. The number of students who are saying in the post-October 7th environment that they feel that they need to hide their Jewish identity has increased, and we've seen it on more campuses in the last 8 weeks. And that's something that is incredibly troubling, and that we have been discussing in our meetings with administrators in a very serious way. Because a lot of that fear, a lot of that concern about showing up as Jewish has now translated into students being concerned about their own physical safety on campus. And so this has been one of the more disturbing developments that we've seen in the post-October 7th environment. And while we know that anti-Semitic incidents are increasing on some campuses, a majority of Jewish students are saying that they're not satisfied with the university's response to those incidents. So that gives you a little bit of a look at the environment for Jewish students on some campuses in the U.S. And I want to share that this is not happening on every single campus across the board, and there are some campuses where we're actually not seeing an uptick in anti-Semitic incidents, and that's very good. But there are certainly too many campuses where we are seeing this kind of very hostile activity, and that's the subject that we'll unpack together in the next 40 minutes or so. So I want to tell you a little bit about CCI, the Campus Climate Initiative, and I think you all are familiar with Hillel International. Hillel is an organization that was created to support Jewish students on college campuses, not just in this country, but around the world. And we have about 850 Hillel institutions embedded in college campuses in the United States, in Canada, and in many places across Europe, as well as in Israel, in Australia. It's really a global institution. And we're celebrating our, really the end of our 100th anniversary this year. And for most of that time, Hillel's work has been focused on supporting the Jewish student experience, making sure that Jewish students who are on university campuses have a place to be Jewish, to explore their Judaism, to explore their Jewish identity, to have Shabbat and holidays, to have a place where they can learn about different aspects of Judaism, and to be in community with other Jews. And that was enough for most of the 100 years that Hillel was in existence. But as we know, as anti-Semitism has increased in society, it's also increased on college campuses. And about 10 years ago, no, I get more like 20 years ago, I think in about 2002 or so, Hillel began to think about the need for actually documenting the number of anti-Semitic incidents on college campuses. We had never been in that business before. There were other organizations that count, ADL, some extent AJC, there other organizations were in the business of actually documenting anti-Semitic incidents. But as challenges on college campuses began to grow, and as we started to hear from campus professionals about the need to be engaged in some of the challenges that were happening outside of the world of Jewish identity and Jewish education, Hillel began to take note, and by 2016, 2017, actually began to document incidents. And what we began to see as we documented incidents was, of course, not only were incidents rising, but Jewish students were being called upon either by their communities, sometimes it was an internal call from, to try to right the wrongs that were taking place on the college campuses. And you started to see a lot of organizations work with Jewish students to try to improve the college environment, the campus climate, as it were, for Jewish students. And at Hillel, we don't believe that that's the responsibility of Jewish students. Jewish students are there to get an education, right? They're there to explore their identities, both as Jews and as citizens of the world. But they're not there to improve the campus climate. that's fundamentally the responsibility of college administrators. And it's their responsibility both for Jewish students and for all students on their communities. Not only is it their professional responsibility as administrators, it's their moral responsibility, and in many cases, it's their legal responsibility. And there are federal regulations and statutes about the ways in which universities have to uphold environments that are conducive to students achieving their academic goals. And we know that if campuses are toxic environments for students, students are not going to be able to reach their academic potential. So Hillel, in that sort of environment of increasing anti-Semitic incidents and certainly anti-Israel incidents on campus, and this understanding that it's not the responsibility of Jewish students to improve the campus climate, started to explore what it would look like to work with university administrators to empower them to do the job that they're there to do, right? And that is really the start, the seeds for what we now call the Campus Climate Initiative. We're rooted in a vision where Jewish college students, right, will feel empowered to express their Jewish identity and values on campuses and be supported by their administrators in an environment that's free of harassment and hostility. And I'll just say that we're a Jewish organization. We're focused on the Jewish student experience. That's the experience that we can speak to as Hillel. But our values around civil climate and inclusion and belonging for Jewish students extends to all students. And so a lot of what we do in the Campus Climate Initiative is both particular and universal, which is so typically Jewish, right? We're particular to the Jewish student community because that's the community that we can speak to and speak about, but it also extends universally to all student communities on campus, and particularly to all marginalized communities on campus. So CCI, or the Campus Climate Initiative, is a division within Hillel that is focused exclusively on campus administrators. Unfortunately, I don't see a lot of students in the work that I do. I see a lot of Hillel pros, professionals, but I don't see students. I see administrators, and my job is to empower them, number one, to understand the climate on their campuses that Jewish students are dealing with, and to give them the knowledge and the tools to be able to improve the campus climate for their Jewish students. And we do that in three primary ways. The first way, number one on the slide that you're looking at, is through what we call our campus cohort program. It's kind of our main delivery mechanism, where we're engaging with administrators from campuses in a cohort setting. So we're working with anywhere between 10 and 15 campuses at a time, and putting them through a very rigorous program. Right now it's a 16-month program of learning and data collection and action planning, so that they understand everything from what is a Jewish student and what is Jewish identity, and the complexity of Jewish identity and the complexity of the Jewish community. What is anti-Semitism in all of its complexity, and how does it manifest on campus? What is their campus environment right now for Jewish students? And we do that through a very robust process of data collection that is unique to each campus. And then once we have a picture of that, what are the gaps, right? What are the areas on each individual campus that they need to work on in order to improve the environment for Jewish students? And together with the campuses, we create an action plan. And when the campuses finish the cohort program after 16 months, they leave our program with that action plan in hand. That's their diploma. And then we have staff that works with them to implement their action plan, so that in the end of the day, we're hoping, it's our goal that the campus climate will be much more inclusive for Jewish students. We also engage with campuses, both those that are in the cohort and those that are not in the cohort, in training around anti-Semitism and Jewish identity and best practices for creating a more inclusive climate, as well as providing them with resources. And it's really important to emphasize that all of this work is done in partnership with universities. Because we're Hillel, right? Because we understand ourselves as embedded in the campus environment on individual campuses, we believe that that's the relationship that Hillel International has with college campuses. We're not in the business of naming and shaming that other organizations are. So when a campus is really facing challenges, we're not in the business of calling it out or putting it in the media, but leaning into a relationship, a partnership with the university so that they will trust us and work with us on improving the climate. And finally, we do a lot of crisis consultation. We've done a lot of that in the aftermath of October 7th, where campuses found themselves navigating challenges that were really, really difficult for them, and needing a trusted partner that understands these issues and that can help them create strategies. So our CCI methodology, again, I kind of walked you through that very quickly, but again, it's rooted in training and education, data collection and analysis, action plans, and then this idea of building a community of practice. And that's really key to this cohort program, is that as much as we can support university administrators in this work, we understand that they also want to be working with other administrators. We're not in their shoes, right? As much as we feel that we can be a tremendous partner to them and a resource to them, we understand this space really well. We're not administrators. And so we're creating a community of practice where administrators can learn from and support one another in this work. They can share with them what works well on their campus and what hasn't worked well on their campus, so that campuses can avoid pitfalls and mistakes that other administrators have made. And we're really trying to put administrators across the country in dialogue with one another, so that they can begin to change the discourse amongst themselves about how they approach Jewish students and Jewish student inclusion. And finally, I'll just talk about sort of the way we talk about this sort of remedy to the challenges facing Jewish students. We talk about a 3A approach: awareness, allyship, and action, right? Awareness is this idea that institutional leaders have to be aware of campus anti-Semitism, right? They have to understand it. They have to be able to identify it. Campus administrators are really good at identifying anti-Semitism when it looks like a swastika on a Hillel house. They're not as good at identifying it when it's more subtle, particularly when it comes from the left of the political spectrum as opposed to the right of the political spectrum. So how do we give administrators the literacy to be able to understand anti-Semitism when it's more disguised, more cloaked, right, in language of human rights, of progressive discourse. So that awareness is critical. The allyship, right? We talk about the importance of institutional leaders demonstrating to students that they understand their needs and they're responsive to their needs, showing up for Jewish students, creating spaces where Jewish students can come to them and talk about the challenges that they're facing on campus. And finally, action, right? Because it's all great. It's great to have that awareness and the allyship, but if it doesn't result in action, it's not going anywhere. And that's why we put so much emphasis on the data collection and the action plans that we're developing with institutions, and then being with them to hold their hand in some cases to help them implement real action steps that we know are going to improve the campus climate. Just really quickly, to talk about some of the things that we've done in the immediately after October 7th in terms of the crisis intervention with campuses, and with Hillel's, quite frankly. We've had a lot of outreach to the 50 campuses that have been in our cohorts for the last 4 years. Really sort of hands-on, support conversations, both as a group of campuses and individually with administrators, including university presidents, about how to navigate this particular extremely difficult time. We've had Zoom meetings and national calls for administrators around the country to help them understand how to navigate the swell of demonstrations and protests and sit-ins and days of resistance and all of that, and how to make sure that their Jewish students are not harmed by the kinds of activity that's taking place on campus. A lot of support for Hillel professionals who are embedded in the campus and who may not have the kind of background to help them navigate the challenges that we're facing. I'm going to stop sharing for a second, and there's two things really that I want to emphasize before I kind of open it up, and because I do want to hear where your heads are at. When we talk about the work of CCI, we understand that we're sort of playing a short-term game and a very much a long-term game. The short-term game is to be able to provide steps in right now in this moment to be able to support Jewish students who are, many of whom are concerned about their safety on campus, making sure that university administrators are, number one, are hearing their Jewish students and can provide some kind of immediate remedies that they need, whether that's security enhancements on campus. And we know, unfortunately, the situation has gotten to a point on campus where universities have had to augment the security that they're providing to students and to Jewish institutions, whether that's Hillel's or Chabad's, armed security, escorts on campus. I mean, really things that are so painful to even think about, but have become necessary on some campuses. That Jewish students are getting support when faculty has created hostile environments in classrooms, and that the university has guidance in how to navigate those, both in terms of supporting Jewish students, but also in terms of potential disciplinary actions for university faculty. So we're sort of playing that short-term game of how do we get steps in place now? How do we get action in place? But we're also playing a long-term game, because that long-term game is really rooted in changing the discourse, changing the way university administrators, by and large, understand Jewish students and engage with them in the context of their commitment to inclusion on the college campuses. And a lot of this focuses on the role and the space of diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives on college campuses, which we know have been the focus of a lot of energy and a lot of resources on campuses for the last number of years. And rightly so, have been created to support marginalized communities on campus. But we also know that no DEI offices in this country have been supported with the awareness that Jewish students are also a traditionally and historically marginalized community on campus and don't really have Jewish students on their radar screen. So, so a lot of what we're really about and trying to do is create that sort of awareness that Jewish students are a marginalized community, break through some of the myths about who Jews are and who they're not, and create some understanding that if campuses are going to be truly inclusive they must be inclusive of Jewish students. There's no such thing as partial inclusion, but for many DEI departments, that's exactly what they're engaged in right now, is a partial inclusion that's driven either by a lack of understanding of the Jewish community and the Jewish experience, or in some cases, really a willful desire not to be inclusive. And so that's part of the long game that we're playing here, is how do we change the understanding of the Jewish experience, and the discourse around inclusion on campus. So I realize now I've talked for a really long time, and I want to just, maybe Marsha, I'm going to leave this to you. If you want to just invite people to ask some questions so we can frame some responses, because I really want to know what's on your mind and what I can answer for all of you.
First of all, Lisa, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Ooh, I'm hearing an echo. Ria, I'm going to let you answer your question while I try to solve this problem. Go ahead.
Okay, Lisa, this was a wonderful presentation, and makes me feel a little bit better about what's happening on the college campuses because of Hillel's plan. And one of the concerns that I have is the faculty. And of course, there are Jewish faculty, and then there are also anti-Semitic faculty, and it takes up all of these things that are also among the students. So, are there plans to have teach-ins for the faculty? I don't know what other word I could use, but that type of, because a lot of them need some background information they don't have, and also to be aware of the history of anti-Semitism, and it's really hard for, I'm sure, for the Jewish faculty on a lot of these campuses.
Yeah. Okay, great. Why don't I take a couple of questions, and then I'll answer them together. But thank you. That's really, really important, Ria. Thank you for raising that.
So, I guess I would also just love to. I've heard a little bit about this more now than I have, but really, the way that different departments on universities have really played a long game in terms of setting up certain faculties that are heavily biased one way, or in a very, I guess, a left-wing way that, I'm a left-wing too, but in a different kind of way. I'd like to know how that happened, and are there any opportunities for that to maybe start to shift a little bit again? Because it sort of happened. It's happened like the appointment of like judges in smaller courts. Like, none of us really know, but it's been going on for many, many years. So I'd love to know about
that. Absolutely. Okay, so I'll let me spend a little bit of time talking about faculty and academic departments, just sort of academia in general. So I guess we knew that we knew that there was certainly a strong presence of anti-Israel, sort of ideology, I would say, within academia for a while now. I think one of the things that has been most shocking to me personally in the post-October 7th climate has been, number one, just the willingness of faculty to be so visible in their support for, quite frankly, for Hamas. I mean, really, and to be so politically engaged on their campuses. It was there. It was always there. We're seeing it in much bigger numbers, and we're seeing it I would say it's just more in your face. And I'm going to give you just a couple of examples of things that have been really egregious. I mean, there's been a number of incidents where faculty have actually are either have gotten themselves fired or on their way to being fired because of almost violent statements that they've put out on social media. There's a case of a faculty member at UC Davis who put on social media something that can only be perceived as threatening, where she says something to the effect of, you know, Jewish reporters have children in schools and we know where they live and they better watch their backs, you know, that kind of thing. And she has now been suspended and she will most likely be fired. We of course had the incident that went viral of the professor at Cornell University who called October 7th, right, exhilarating, right? I mean, actual celebrations of Hamas. In addition to teachers, professors, and teaching assistants who have done things like cancel classes so that they themselves could attend anti-Israel activities on their campuses, walkouts and sit-ins and all kinds of things, and have also encouraged their students to join them in those kinds of walkouts. I mean, those are things that you know, I think we've all been really shocked at just how willing faculty has been to embrace their anti-Israel and in some cases anti-Semitic activism. I have been calling this our Charlottesville moment, because I think just as in Charlottesville, the activists on the far right, there were no hoods, right? They were out there in their chinos with their faces exposed, embracing their anti-Semitism. Jews will not replace us, right? I mean, it's all over the place. You can see who they are. And in the aftermath of October 7th, we're seeing the same thing on the far left, with the exception of the students who on many campuses are completely covering their faces. But the faculty is not. I mean, the faculty is out there owning their, let's call it activism. So that's been really shocking. But we also know that this has been a very long time in coming. And it stems really, if you look at the discourse from within the liberal camp, it really starts after 1967, where we see a split among liberal intellectuals, particularly around Israel and around third world liberation movements. And as we start to see this divide where some liberals, like Michael Walzer, who is one of the leading intellectuals in this camp, hold on to this idea that, that Israel is a liberal, institution embracing liberal values, and you see other liberals start to really pull away from that idea and embrace the PLO. And embrace this idea of Palestinian resistance. Why does this happen? I think it happens largely because there's a shift in an understanding of the roots of conflict, and particularly in this country, there's a mapping of that kind of split within the liberal camp to a tendency to view conflict through racial lens, through an Americanized racial lens. And we see this becoming deeper and deeper rooted within left-wing liberal intellectuals who are embedded in certain academic departments, whether it's sociology, certainly in the humanities, some of the social sciences. We see it in disciplines that are focused on the study of minoritized communities, such as gender studies and African American studies and Chicano studies and things like that, where this whole notion of conflict is really rooted in a racialized lens. And in that, it's a very binary way of thinking about conflict. This sort of idea that all conflict is rooted in white oppressors who are, victimizing people of color. It ties into an anti-colonial ideology where, of course, colonialism is the evil perpetrated by the white supremacist oppressor world against the people of color. Ties into other ideas of patriarchy as well. But the main idea really being is that conflict becomes boiled down to white supremacist colonialist oppression that targets people of color. And in that binary paradigm, Israel becomes lumped into the white oppressor colonialist enterprise. And so that's the reality of the discourse today in many disciplines in academia. It's why we tend to see the faculty on college campuses really embracing this, incorporating it into their scholarship, and we know that the problem, of course, is that it's not supported by real scholarly inquiry. Right? We know that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is not a racial conflict. We know that Israelis, by and large, are not white. We know a lot of things to be true, and yet this binary discourse has become so dominant in certain areas of academia that it controls the agenda in on a lot of college campuses. It's deeply, deeply troubling. And yet it resonates so largely among scholars or pseudo scholars, as it were. So a lot of our work has to be done at the scholarly level to dismantle this, but it's not an easy enterprise. It's taken us a very long time to get here, and it's going to take us a very long time to push back. And I'll add one of the difficulties about approaching this in a scholarly way. And of course, Ria mentioned, what about teach-ins and what a lot of that is fortunately taking place. And one of the things that we're very fortunate is that Hillel International, among many organizations, have been supportive of universities and being able to bring faculty to campus to be able to teach the conflict in a much more nuanced way. But part of the baggage that comes along with this binary ideology around the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is this myth that if Jews really are white, and if Jews, are part of the oppressor class, they can't possibly be the victim of anti-Semitism. Our whole presentation, our whole discourse around the rise of anti-Semitism on campus becomes suspect because we're part of the oppressor class, which is, this sort of circular conspiratorial kind of thinking, right? Which really is at the root of anti-Semitism. And yet it resonates so much among those who hold this ideology. So you can start to see, I think, the ways in which the discourse is circular. It's like it's almost like arguing with rational arguments and with facts against a camp that's really not all that interested in rational discourse and in facts. And that is a huge problem for the academy. But that's really how so much of this becomes manifest on the campuses today, and makes our work so much more challenging.
Is that, by the way, the kind of high level education you're trying to offer the people on college campuses to sort of understand? I mean, what you just said was really interesting, and I'd need to read it a couple times to digest it and maybe explain that to others. But that's the kind of training you're trying to provide.
Yeah. So let me start. Like when we work with a college, when we work with a cohort, And we're now working with our fourth cohort. We've 50 universities have participated in this program, by the way, and we just launched our fifth cohort, which is going to start in February, and we're hoping to get about 25 to 30 campuses in this cohort. And when universities participate, what they're doing is putting together a team of a minimum of 4 senior level administrators who form their core team, and they're going through this learning program. Okay, so this is their heads of DEI, this is their heads of student affairs, this might be their general counsel, it might be a provost, right? These are senior, serious folks on college campuses, and we pull them together. And the first day of our learning together, we tell them that Jewish identity is complex. And by the way, although many of the Jews that you know look like me, and I often teach this class, white presenting, Jews, are a multiracial, multi-ethnic people. We don't all look like this. And certainly our lived experience in this country and historically does not parallel the white experience in this country. I have to tell you, that is news to so many of these senior level university administrators who have PhDs and EDDs and who are working in the space of working in the space of inclusion on their college campuses. These are people who, are committed to uplifting minoritized communities. They have no idea what Jewish students, what Jewish identity is about. They have, we open it up for questions and we say to them, what surprises you about this information we're sharing? So many of our senior administrators on college campuses, and let me tell you, we work with campuses from the Ivy League to small liberal arts colleges to, huge state universities. I can't tell you how many of these people don't know that Jews come in all colors. That Jews come from around the world, that Jewish identity is complex, that anti-Semitism is complex. Like I said, they could not identify for you what anti-Semitism looks or feels like if it doesn't appear as a swastika on a Hillel house. So we have so think about that. And then think about this really complex, intellectual, conversation that I've just had with you about how we define conflict, or how the far left defines conflict as, as racially constructed, and Jews are white, and they have no understanding. And so when an SJP chapter, Students for Justice in Palestine chapter, holds an event on campus and says things about, Zionism is racism, right? And talks about Jews as white oppressors of, or committing genocide against people of color in Palestine, because that's what they would say, right? University administrators don't know how to read that. They don't hear it the way that we hear it, right? To them, it's, first of all, it's political discourse, which is a whole nother level of conversation on the campus, right? Because if it's political discourse and it's criticism of Israel, right, then it's probably not anti-Semitic. This is how many of them are processing this, right? So we have to give them tools to be able to understand the coded language, right? The ideology behind all of this. Let alone, the fact that so much of this discourse is rooted in in anti-Semitic propaganda that came out of the Soviet Union, right? And why the Soviets chose to hide their anti-Semitism as anti-Zionism. This is so foreign to them, and yet this is everything that Jews hear when somebody says Zionism is racism, right? In a second, this is what we hear, this is what we feel. And these are huge blind spots to administrators. So we have to go through the business of unpacking and helping administrators unlearn what they think they know about Jews, so that they can navigate the kinds of discourse and tensions on their own campuses. It's a huge undertaking. And I'm really happy that we've got partners who've been willing to take this journey with us on 50 campuses. And it looks like we're going to have a lot more in the next round, because I think university administrators are starting to realize just how much they don't know and how much they need to know. But this is really, really deep stuff that we're asking them to explore with us.
So, Ria, I'm sorry. I just want to, can I ask this question and then I'll on you. So 2 things. One is I'd love to know if and how you're tracking your earlier cohorts to see, because again, you were doing this before October 7th. So one question I would have is, are the campuses that you work with prior to this current cohort, right, which happened to coincide with this massacre, did they handle things better because they were better prepared? Maybe yes, maybe no. That's one.
Yeah.
And how are you tracking? And then the other question is, are you working with campuses that have no Jewish students? Because part of the problem is that there's only 15 to 16 million Jews in the world, and many people of all college campuses will never even meet a Jewish person. So that's like a totally weird thing, too.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So those were 2 questions, but
Yeah.
take Priya's question before you answer mine.
Yes, absolutely.
So I wanted to ask you about the community colleges that one of my daughters is on the board here in Orange County, and the provost wanted to do something to make it the community colleges here, a safe place. So have you reached out to the community colleges?
Yeah. Okay, great questions. So Marcia, you must be in my staff meetings, because that's all we've been talking about is tracking, especially in the post-October 7th environment. So the answer is yes, we track, and I'm actually going to ask you, Marcia, if I can come back to you in a couple of weeks, because we're about to put a survey in the field to get a better sense of how our campuses have done in the post-October 7th. And we've been collecting data since October 7th on a variety of different variables. And we're going to match that with a survey. And then I'm hoping that by the end of January, we'll be able to see how our campuses are doing compared to what we call CCI campuses. So I'm going to ask you, it's a great question. I'm going to ask you to stay tuned on that. But certainly we've been tracking these things before October 7th. And so we have a very well-developed theory of change that lists a number of variables that we believe are essential for moving the needle in terms of campus climate. And so part of the work that campuses do, a significant part of what they do when they finish the cohort program, right, is that their committees continue to meet, and the idea is that they are implementing parts of their action plan, and we're monitoring that. Okay, they did this and they did this, and this is a little more challenging and they need some support, and we're going to help, so we're actually able to see what they're doing in terms of implementation. I mentioned to you that when they're in the program, we do a huge process of data collection so that we can measure the campus climate in that moment, in that time that they're in the program. Part of what we are doing is we're going to be doing the same kind of data analysis 3 years out of the program. So we're just getting ready to start with our first set of campuses next year. Same kind of thing, so we can measure pre and post, so we can actually look at the data and see what the data is telling us about change. I will say, though, that we know that there are a number of campuses where the work with CCI has been transformative. And I'm going to give you I'm going to give you one example because I think it's really meaningful for this group, because we're in California, obviously. You may all know that San Francisco State University, for many, many years, was one of the campuses that had the most difficult challenges when it came to anti-Zionist and anti-Israel and anti-Semitic sentiments. I've been in this work for 12 years, and I've always said that I would send my kids to most campuses around the country, regardless of what, the perception is. That is one campus I would not have sent my kids to. It was, and the rot came from the top, from it's not nice to say, but it's true, from the university president. They had a change of leadership a couple of years ago, joined our program, and I have to say has been the model for how to navigate these kinds of challenges. They have transformed processes. They have transformed, first of all, just, the new president, Lynn Mahoney, has brought in senior administrators who are so deeply committed to Jewish inclusion and inclusion across the board. They are one of the few campuses that, while they've had anti-Zionist, anti-Semitic protests on their campuses, because, but all within the parameters of the First Amendment and everything else, have done more to support Jewish students, to keep the environment civil and safe for Jewish students. It's been remarkable. And it's because of the work that they've done to change their climate, their commitment to it, their follow through, their CCI committee. They were in our second cohort. Their CCI committee continues to meet monthly. They have a quarterly meeting and a monthly meeting. We're involved with it. It's still very much a relationship of feedback and support, and it's been remarkable. And there are other campuses that have done very well also, I think, because they've benefited from what they've learned through this program. Other campuses are facing serious challenges. I'm mindful of the time. I want to get to some of these other things. Are we working with campuses with without Jewish students, and the community colleges? So CCI, even though we're now working with our fourth cohort, it's still a relatively new program, and we've gotten this cohort program to a place, I think, where we're very comfortable. We're making some minor adjustments for the next cohort, but I think we're very comfortable with it. And we know that there's a need for rapid expansion. And we're right now actually in the process of developing some tools that will help us expand our reach to more campuses around the country. The model as it currently exists, it was created for campuses where there is a Hillel presence, because the Hillel director is a key part of the partnership in the CCI cohort team. So it's a partnership between Hillel International through CCI, through the local Hillel, and through the administration. And because the Hillel director is so embedded in the campus and holds a lot of the key relationships with the administrator, we felt that it was very important to have the cohort program work in partnership with a Hillel. And we really hadn't imagined what it would look like in the absence of a strong Hillel presence. So that model will probably not change all that much, but we know that there is a need to expand to more campuses, including to campuses where there is no Hillel. So we're right now working on a new model that we believe will allow for that to happen. It will probably require us to have some more support at the Hillel International level, because we can't expect campuses to do this without some kind of a partner in the Jewish community, whether it's Hillel, I don't know, maybe it's another local organization,
maybe a local synagogue leader. Meaning, like, if there is a college with some Jewish students but not enough to really justify a Hillel, there is a synagogue within a 10-mile radius. There might be a way to engage a committed clergy to become part of
Yes.
a team or something like that.
Absolutely. And that's something that I've been thinking about a lot because of my background as a Federation professional,
Right.
understanding the assets that Jewish communities have on the ground. So I've been thinking a lot about that. And so as we develop this new model, that may be something that we have to lean into. So it's right now, it's in development, and we're hoping that we will have something in place. Part of it is it's going to be an asynchronous, it's going to be a hybrid model. So it'll be some online learning with some in-person stuff in a much shorter time period. We have to build that out. It takes some time, but it's certainly what we're thinking about in this new environment. With regard to the community colleges, I think that the community colleges would fall into that same category of campuses that might be able to take advantage of this new model. I know from my work here in Orange County that community colleges was one of the next arenas for the kinds of challenges that students were facing. It wasn't just on the 4 years. We saw it when we had the Driving Out Darkness Summit when I was at Federation. We invited community college administrators to participate and really got to hear firsthand about what's happening on their campuses. So again, I think this is probably going to be the next iteration of outreach and education that we'll be able to do with campuses that don't have an embedded Hillel.
Well, I just, Lisa, this was so fabulous. I learned a lot from you today. And, I guess the last question I'll leave you with that I'd love for you to address when you come back, and maybe you can be maybe we can even shoot for like the last Monday in January, or the first Monday in February, if that, you'll let me know what works best for you, or maybe even over President's Day weekend or something like that, when you might have a Monday off, if that, we'd love to have you come back. But the other thing that I would love to wonder if it's impacting, you don't have to answer this now, but in terms of hiring new faculty, certainly we don't want any academy to be biased one way or another, but can this be something that is not, people aren't afraid to talk about, when they are expanding and changing a department? Because that is one of the things. It took 40 years, it took 67 to get to where we are now. And we have to look at the long game. Can we be more broad-minded in terms of the hiring of faculty on certain universities? I don't know if that's a piece of the conversation or not, but I hope it would be. Just to say, think about that. And did the guy at Cornell, did who celebrated who called October 7th exhilarating, did they lose their job?
Well, he's not teaching next semester.
Okay.
So so there's reason to believe that he has been disciplined. I actually don't know. We've been trying to find out if he's actually been officially fired, or is just taking a semester off. We suspect that his decision to leave suddenly has to do with his job status. But he will not be teaching students next semester.
And the last thing to remember is that some of these, not tons, but some of these are also Jewish professors. Some of these celebrate that's complicated.
Yeah, absolutely. And
which
that's
goes
a whole
back to the
other
first thing you say, being Jewish is really complicated.
Yes, absolutely. That's been a something that's been a little heartbreaking, actually. But we know, it existed before 10/7, and it will continue to be a challenge for the Jewish community.
Well, listen, thank you all for coming today. And I hope what you've learned from Lisa, you'll be able to share in conversations you have with other people. It's all part of really an organic problem that goes back thousands of years, hundreds of years, but really, and, in this country in the last 50 years. And it's our opportunity to not give up and chip away a little bit. Lisa, I hope that the funding for this program is generous and continuing to be more so. I would like to imagine that certain family foundations would be very invested in this. And
we're fortunate that a lot of people are interested in this in this work. So
I'm so happy. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you, Marcia.
We'll see you. No ALI next week because it's December 25th, and no ALI the following week because it's January 1. And Daniel will be back on January 8th to begin to wrap up his great philosophical debates of the Middle Ages. And we will have a whole new menu for you for 2024. I'll be sending that soon. I want to wish you all just, first of all, I want to thank all of you for being here. For those of you who support this program and making it possible for all of us to, to have scholars here, and thank you from the bottom of my heart. If you would like to support this program and you haven't been able to yet, you're always welcome to visit the collaborative webpage and make a donation if you're thinking of some end of the year giving. We're grateful for any and everything. And we just, this is a different kind of community, but what a privilege to learn together. And Maria, so glad you joined us today. Is this your first time with ALI? Where are you from?
Muted.
I think you're muted, but which is everybody's always muted. Oh, there you are. Oh,
Yep.
no. Anyway, we didn't hear what you said, but muting is hard. Unmuting is hard. I'm sorry. Let me see if I can unmute you. Maybe I can unmute you. I don't think I can. Oh, I asked you to unmute, but okay.
There you go.
Oh, hi.
Got it.
Well, I'm from Cleveland, Ohio, so I'm far away. You've got the great weather.
Yes. Oh, how do you
And
care about?
Oh, we don't.
yeah, just briefly, I work with the Jewish Family Service in Cleveland. I'm a mental health counselor, and I've been asked to spend one day a week at the Hillel, to be available just as a resource. So I'm trying to get up to date, not only on what Hillel is doing nationally, internationally, and I'm very interested in this climate initiative. I've been a faculty member, a writing instructor in colleges for like 30 years. So this is very relevant to me.
So, Maria, are you
so
working with Jared in Cleveland? Jared Isaacson?
I'm going to meet
Okay.
him this Wednesday. Yeah, so obviously you
great.
know him.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Okay, that's good. He'll be able to tell you. Hillel's actually done a lot.